Happy 250th birthday, America. Well, we've had 250 years of freedom with no tyrants, lots of ups and downs, but we've had freedom. So happy birthday, America. As we celebrate the 4th of July, Tesla decides to do what any great American company would do. They branded the Cybercab in America 250 Freedom. And lo and behold, Tesla puts up a video on X. There was a passenger in the Cybercab with no wheels, no pedals. Tesla has self-certified it as SAE level 4. Due to the current regulatory environment, they cannot charge yet. That is the key. And then the World Cup's been fantastic. US had that great win this week. And Waymo's been running ads and saying, we're safer, we're safer, we're safer. But you can't take it to all the games. That's something to watch there. And then lo and behold, the US government says to Polestar, too many Chinese components, you're banned. And the big news, the reason we have the inspector hat on, and I'll put the other one on later, is that we broke the news that Waymo and Uber got divorced in Phoenix, and some very nice outlets credit us to it, and some other outlets, not so nice. And we've got a jam-packed week, so let's start it off, Walt, with the drama.
I was going to chide you and say, no, that's a baseball cap. Then I realized that this is part of your new merch where you have Inspector Clouseau on your baseball cap as opposed to the traditional Inspector Clouseau hat, which I think I might prefer slightly. But yeah, you do deserve a clappy hat. I mean, this all started over the weekend when and by the way, you didn't even send me a text or anything. I just see a post. I think you might have tagged me in there saying this looks like, Waymo and Uber are done in Phoenix. And I assumed it was Omega, but this is just Grayson's kind of, diligence in checking this stuff, ahead of putting out whatever product is. So there's your clappy hat there. We reached out to Alex Roy, who I think lives in Phoenix. He came back with some feedback, couldn't find it on the Uber app. So thank you, Alex Roy. Takes a village. So I obviously reached out to Uber, got confirmation from Uber, posted that. And then, of course, an hour or two later, the press starts to kind of zeroing in on this because we put our stuff up on Bloomberg and a couple other places. So I don't know. I mean, again, thanks to CNBC and I guess TechCrunch, I don't know, Bloomberg kind of, I think other news reports just failed to kind of mention this, which is unfortunate, but whatever. We're still out there. And again, if you're listening to Autonomy Markets and following our Twitter feeds, you're going to get that information first. That's the bottom line. So anyway, nice job. Nice job, Grayson. There's a little bit of a teamwork on that, getting the confirmation. Why do you think it was so quiet? And then we'll get into the details of what exactly was killed.
Well, first and foremost, clappy hat to us. And yes, we are pretty active on X. And we have an opinion from time to time, and we share that wonderful information with the autonomy community. The reason why I believe that it was quiet, Uber doesn't want the drama. The way that Uber did it was very interesting. No press release, no post on X, no blog, no nothing. Merely just updated the website to say autonomous vehicles are unavailable in that market, done very quietly. And then lo and behold, after all the news broke, you've got the Uber bulls coming out in full steam. There's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong. It was very, very small. It was very, very small. It was only 12 vehicles. Yes, it might be small, but the pilot lasted, if you want to call it a pilot, that's what the technical term was, 948 days. And why is that relevant? Because Austin has been going on for 482 days and counting, and Atlanta's been going on for 370 days and counting. And if you follow the breadcrumbs that we've been following, I believe that Austin and Atlanta are the next dominoes to fall. And then when that happens, what do the Uber bulls say? Where do they go?
Well, a couple things. I did use some AI to go back to past comments made about Phoenix. And to be clear, Uber never has overstated, what the experience was like in Phoenix. I think the problem is most people, or the issue is that most people, when they went to Phoenix, they weren't going to bother trying to get it through an Uber app. They just went to the Waymo app because they had a much larger, Waymo runs a much larger and separate fleet, which we've talked about in this podcast. I know, again, for longtime listeners, it's not a surprise to you that there were two separate fleets in Phoenix, one for Waymo and one for Uber. I guess we didn't really key in on how small that fleet was. And I guess my first question, Grayson, 12 cars. The service area was 180 square miles. You could say that if you're Uber, hey, we ended this because we've, got what we needed out of this trial. But like, what do you really learn with 12 cars in a 180 square mile area? Like, what are the possible learnings there?
Very little, because if you're over 180 square miles, the data that you're going to gather is going to be minuscule. You can't sit there and argue to me, oh, you're going to learn wait times, you're going to learn patterns. To me, the learnings are very minuscule. Perhaps this is an assumption. Perhaps you learned fleet management for those 12 vehicles because they have to go sleep somewhere at night and they have to be serviced. Perhaps that was the learning. But if you look at it from an overall market learnings, I would say that they're extremely small. Very small.
Again, to Uber's credit, they've already, they've always profiled Austin and Atlanta as the kind of the real markets and characterized this as small. Just 12 cars was super small. I guess my second question is why now? You on your rant, you rattled off like a couple of different numbers, 900 whatever days. Like, can you express that in months or years? Like, so again, Uber said they terminated it. Was it the end of a contract? Like, why? I guess the simple question, Grayson, is why now? Why do you think this occurred now?
I believe it is a series, as I said earlier, a series of dominoes that are going to fall, and it is the first off ramp for untangling this partnership. Perhaps it was the end of a contractual agreement. We don't know. I'm just assuming. Perhaps the partnership if you want to call it the partnership, in Phoenix ran roughly 3 years. Austin is going over a year and a half, and Atlanta is barely over a year. So perhaps those markets are also coming to an end, and it's contractually. It just seems odd, to say the least, the timing. And another thing that I put the suspicion inspector hat on is that we get a post on X, Dara's visiting Nuro, going for a ride in the vehicles. And then today we get a post from Alex Kendall at Wayve. Dara's there with Alex and the CEO of Nissan at a World Cup game. So the news comes out, and then all suddenly Dara's out with 2 additional partners. I know I'm reading between the lines here, Walt, but that's very interesting timing of these photographs being released. And everything is calculated and released for a reason, in my opinion.
So there's a lot to unpack there. And you move forward here a little bit. So let's go back on the 900 days or 3 years. When Dara has talked about, this is from memory, so I may have this wrong, but I'm pretty sure when Dara has talked about, length of agreements, or maybe also current CFO Balaji, 1 or 2 year things, they boasted, but the fact that they weren't long agreement. It's possible that they had a 1 year agreement that continued to extend and extend and extend. The challenges in this relationship have occurred for a while. Like, I'm not sure why you don't do that all at once. I don't know why this has to be a quote unquote, domino effect. So I don't think you really answered that question. I'm not saying that I have the answer, but like that didn't really give me the answer of why now. I'm not even sure why now. I mean, it's kind of a dead news week, right? You can kind of quietly get out of this, but you had to know that like if you're no longer operating in Phoenix, that was going to hit the market. So I think at some point you just rip the Band-Aid off. And with 12 cars, the reality is you're probably not learning that much. So what's the point of like, maintaining that in the market? Now, some may suggest that, they're ready to put someone else in there. And you talked about Dara doing a video with Nuro, and I think there was another one, to your point, in the World Cup with Wayve. Neither of those companies are going to be prepared to backfill into Phoenix anytime soon. Like Nuro, who, we're huge supporters of, it is going to be a huge success for them to deliver 100 cars, 150 cars in California, their primary market, which is where Dara was taking this ride, the same location that I've hopped into those cars. That's a huge win and would enable them to raise money and perhaps, foreclose other competitors in the market because of their success. They also have announced Houston. So my point is like, they're kind of one of the winners out there. You're obviously not bringing WeRide in to the United States. So like, who specifically do you think you're backfilling? Zooks? Like who in the, so anyway, and I'm not saying Uber has claimed this. I'm just saying this is some of the bold thesis. Oh, they shut them out because they got someone else they're going to place in there. Like, great. They can make an announcement, but who can deliver 150 or 100 cars even to Phoenix, within the next 6 months? Is there anyone out there that can do that, Grayson?
Asked about why not just rip the band off all 3. What we do know for a fact, Uber has confirmed this, that the fleet they own the fleet and they managed it outside of the Waymo fleet. We do not know the fleet integration. So I think there's something to watch for potential asset ownership in those other markets. As it relates to Phoenix, I will ask you this. The Bloomberg reported today, Lucid went through a major restructuring. So I'll ask the question, where are the vehicles going to come from?
Well, that's what I just asked you. I literally just asked you the question. So you're doing a Jedi mind trick here and trying to flip it back on me? I literally just said, in Phoenix, who can replace them within 6 months? Like, what vendor is ready to do that?
No one. There's the Jedi mind trick for you. No one. You could sit here and say, well, Stellantis can backfill it. Yes, but the Wayve tech has not been validated for L4 in America.
Right. That's my point. Like, who's going to deliver any type of, even with the safety driver there? I mean, I guess you could argue AV Ride could shift some of their cars over, but, just go back to past episodes and our experience with where AV Ride is, in Dallas, and how that's performing. Going to, head back to Texas in a couple of months now to reevaluate it. But, the answer is that is not the answer. And again, on the Lucid thing, the tie-in here, Grayson, was not about whether they are going to be in Lucid. Nuro is going to be in Phoenix. The tie-in is that Dara is dropping this video with, Jay-Z, CEO, co-founder of Nuro. Great. Again, big supporters. But and this is a topic that we've talked to the company about before, they're partnered with a company, Lucid, which is clearly struggling, right? They reported numbers this week that were below expectations on the EV side of things. They brought in a new CFO among other executives. You have to, there is a lot of integration work that you're dealing with the company. Like, I get that they are an NVIDIA shop and kind of good to go, and it's a nice high-end car. And look, and Nuro is going to sign up additional OEMs for sure. But the challenge, this is part of the challenge of autonomy, right? There are so many different pieces that need to work together in unison, to get to a winning finish line. And I don't think you can totally discount, the additional headwind that Lucid, provides to this partnership, unfortunately. Because I think that obviously the sensors and the technology are working great.
It is an unfortunate situation. The question is, how much longer will the PIF, which are the majority shareholders, put up with this? Is this the last restructuring? Perhaps. I'm just assuming that. And I'll throw a curveball at you. We look at this. Could potentially Motional be the Uber partner for Phoenix because they have over 100 vehicles, visited them in Vegas, that they could potentially ship some of those right down to Phoenix from Las Vegas, and they're manufactured by Hyundai. But as we know, and we've talked about in depth, those vehicles come from Singapore, not from Georgia. So perhaps they try and backfill with that. That's a little bit of a curveball there.
Yeah, you're doing like the double Jedi mind trick on me now. So now you do have an answer of who could backfill in Phoenix. I don't even know. Like, maybe they don't even feel pressure to Phoenix. Maybe this is like going to be a dying news cycle and who cares? And they just move on with life, and whatever the third market is that Nuro announces or that they announce with Wayve has nothing to do with Phoenix. And this just, life is what it is. Let's go back and just close on this topic. Give me your specific timeline for either. I'm not even going to tie you to one of the others, not Austin or Atlanta. When does a divorce happen in Austin or Atlanta between Uber and Waymo?
I'll go on the record and say that I expect it to happen by Q1 27 at the latest.
At the latest, okay. And I'm gonna footnote one more thing on this. When that news came out, Uber's stock didn't really get crushed, right? I mean, Uber stock is already down on the concerns of autonomy, and I think, when you and I first started talking about this issue with the relationship, when many other people thought it was rock solid after Austin, and we kept kind of picking at the scab, so to speak. But I think, based on our listeners, which are kind of the best listeners in the industry, the movers and shakers, I think it's basically in the market, right? Meaning that I think people realize that the Waymo Uber relationship, is only potentially now upside in the future, when this view is that, after, many years perhaps, where Waymo puts 100 cars, then all of a sudden they get manufacturing and they drop volumes of cars into each of these markets. Maybe then at some point in the future, you get to the kind of Jason Calcana's bull case theory where, well, you have to find demand somewhere. So then they just start putting their cars, to fill it with demand. Because why not? Right. Which again is a logical thing. We're just not close to that event happening. We're going off obviously the opposite way right now.
And I think, I'll take the opposite side of what Jason says. I think consumers are going to want a consistent experience, and they're not going to have a problem downloading an app that gives them a consistent experience. And once the brand is established, the consumers will just become a habit. Just like Uber's a habit for some individuals, go in the Tesla app, the Waymo app, or insert your favorite Robotaxi name app is going to become a habit, and the demand narrative is going to continue to fizzle out.
Now let's talk about something that's not a divorce, because there was never a marriage, and that is Tesla with the platform companies. There might not even ever have been a flirtation or a date or a one-night stand for that matter. I think in general, Dara has kind of flipped back and forth and like, oh, we're open to anything, and we'd love to put them on the network, and then at one point kind of denigrated cars without LiDAR. David Risher, CEO of Lyft, not exactly in the strongest position of a company right now overall, takes it a step further and, posts a blog that they published what they call a multi-sensor safety standard for Lyft. One sensor type doesn't make the network. And basically, like an attack on Tesla. I think one of these things is like, you can't fire me because I didn't quit. We can't get divorced because I'm not going to marry you. It's like, when Tesla, if and when, I know there's people that believe it'll never happen and those that believe it's going to happen in mass overnight. But if anything happens there, they're not going to partner with Lyft or Uber. And now now basically Risher's got the cover. Like, well, we don't want anything that doesn't have all these different sensors. I was told that, Tesla's, been around for whatever, a year in Austin. Obviously, you and I use FSD. I was told that there was going to be a really fatal error on this system, even with the limited number of cars. In the first month of this thing being launched, here we are a year in, right? FSD is what it is. Even this thing that caused a lot of noise last week where someone was accelerating into a building. I think you've seen that person. I think that person was then arrested for manslaughter because, it was in fact not FSD. And it was that. There's been plenty of, now granted, on the flip side, they haven't gotten there, but I think, we can rest assured, not that anyone believed otherwise, that that the Tesla and let's say platform companies, Lyft and Uber, are going to be non-existent. But in the meantime, what was happening at Tesla this week?
Cybercab hit the roads of Austin with an individual who, based on regulatory environments, I'm under the assumption is a Tesla employee, cruising around the streets, releasing video. Looks good, and it's branded for America 250. So, smart political move by Elon there, but Cybercab is hitting the roads, getting one step closer to deployment. And why do I say one step closer to deployment? Because Tesla this week released a first responders guide for safety of how to operate on the vehicle in the case of an incident, and there's another sign that's getting closer and closer and closer to deployment.
Okay, so again, let's go back on the car itself. Just to be clear, in the Cybercab, there's no wheels, there's no pedals. The Texas, I think, Department of Transportation has confirmed this is a control-less design. If there's no wheels or no pedals, Grayson, what exactly is the safety monitor doing in the front seat? First question. And then second question is, I've lost track of your definitions. Does this count as a robotaxi if you have a safety monitor either in the driver or passenger seat? I guess there is no driver's seat in the Cybercab.
It is not a safety observer because there is no way for the individual to take over the vehicle. So it is not a safety observer. It is an individual that is testing the technology. So it is a fully autonomous vehicle with an individual testing technology because they do not have the ability to grab the wheel, hit the pedals, or take over the vehicle in any manual form.
So what's the point of having the person there? What can they actually do?
The person there can only hit a button, just like you and I are in the vehicle. Hit a button and pull over. That's it. To me, it's just, you need to look at it as a signal that Tesla's getting closer to putting this into the hands of the public. And when they do put it in the hands of the public, not to go in a regulatory row, they're not going to be able to charge until they get the exemption. But they'll be able to put individuals in the vehicle.
Got it. So now let's get to the second point. because you were so excited to get to both points at once. The first responder guide, which again, in your terms, more signal about what this means. Now, you know, you and I were both at that plant in Texas. We saw the lines. We saw that exact line where that Model Y, where it was getting, signed by all the employees, came off the line, and the capabilities. We went to, parking lot locations in Texas where we saw tons of Ys, and obviously the Cybercab starting to just stack up. This is like they hit the milestone of this Q2. Now, just to be clear, they're not hitting production volumes day one. That will obviously ramp over the next couple of quarters. And as a reminder, we also saw the location where more capital equipment is going to go in and more Cybercabs will be generated. So they're still showing the outward signs that, hey, we believe in the technology enough that we're going to continue to crank out these cars. It doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to happen. What I'm building to, Grayson, is with your signs, with the first responder guides, where they're working with people to deal with this, at least in Miami or whatever, and the signs that we're seeing, like, is it possible that what we've been waiting for all along is they're like, look, there's no reason for us to put a bunch of Ys in the market. It's too expensive. We're believers in the Cybercab, and they've just been waiting to tee off in the Cybercab before they drop the Autonomy Markets guideline of 100 cars in a market, in Austin. And is this what we've been waiting for all along, or are there still safety issues that they're hashing their way through?
I think you're spot on correct. I do not believe it. I'll say so. I'm not a safety engineer. I do not believe that there are safety issues holding this back. I believe, based on it is regulatory that is holding Cybercab back. And I know that for a fact, because you can look at the Federal Register and see it. What I do believe is that you, as we have seen with all the photos and all the documentation that's available online publicly, they're clearly ramping up Cybercab. And you say, well, why is that? Because on the federal side, you are getting movement on regulatory. We are getting closer and closer to a federal framework that will allow Tesla to legally deploy Cybercab in all 50 states. And drum roll, please, charge for rides. That benefits Tesla. It also benefits Zoox, and it benefits any U.S. domestic manufacturer of an autonomous driving system that wants to deploy a fully autonomous vehicle with no pedals and no wheels. So we're seeing that really good regulatory movement, which is aligning with the manufacturing movement. And then it is my assumption that once there is a regulatory certainty signed into law, that incredible factory that you and I walked at Giga, you're going to see that thing ramp up pretty substantially. And yes, I do believe you're right. Then all of a sudden you're going to start to see Cybercabs flooded in pretty decently large numbers. And when I say decently large numbers, I will give you a confidence number. You're probably 100 to 150, maybe 200 in a handful of markets to start, and then you'll start to ramp from there.
Well, I hope you're right. I might not be as confident as you in the moment. We'll see. Frankly, I prefer that they were Model Ys. I find that to be a more comfortable car to ride in. I hope that the Robotaxi fleet is not going to be all. I'm willing to pay a premium, but I get it. You got to get your costs low, and the cost quotations for these new Cybercabs are quite low, and we've seen it. We see how they get there in terms of the specifications. But it does bring up another question, Grayson, that I have is a lot of times when we talk to the engineers at these various companies, some have asserted that like when you move from vehicle to vehicle, there's still going to be some testing around that, whether you change the sensors or not. So the Cybercab has a different physical footprint, lower to the ground clearly, than the Y. Is there some process of time or miles that need to be logged, do you think, before they can unleash the Cybercabs in the market?
I believe they've already accomplished it, because what you and I saw and what's been documented on X, they've been driving the Cybercabs around with steering wheels and pedals. And you've seen the validation vehicles with the ground truth LiDAR sensors on them. I believe in certain markets, let's use Austin, for example, and perhaps Dallas, where we have seen some photos. Those two markets are relatively close, ready to go. I would say Austin, obviously, for a lot of reasons, is further along than Dallas. But if I give you a rollout, I'll give you a prediction. It'll be Austin, Dallas, Houston, and then it's either going to be Phoenix or Miami in terms of a rollout in the markets getting ready.
Where else I'm seeing videos, like we saw videos of the Cybercabs with their, LiDAR validating system is in the semi. So there's more and more of those things people are seeing out on the road in the semis, and we obviously have a lot of trucking companies that we're following, and we think that's a massive market. And look, I wonder how far away Tesla is from trying to talk about that.
Do you want to know something very, very interesting about the semi, which is not discussed a lot, but it is publicly documented in multiple places, including a press release?
Sure, lay it on us.
Tesla has a partnership with Uber Freight. The semi will be available on Uber Freight. And if the validation photos that you and I have seen and the videos are any indication, it is my belief that at some point Tesla's going to make that autonomous, and those vehicles will be operating on Uber Freight. That is very interesting that I don't think is talked enough about.
So do these semis include LiDAR in their sensor stack, or are they also vision only like the cars?
They are vision only, just like the cars.
Okay, well, it should be interesting to see how that that develops. Let's move on to the Olympics. Congrats to the U.S. for the huge win. Also to the U.K. for their win. Harry Kane, nice work. I think Saka's probably going to deliver more wins for them going forward, but I digress. For those that have been watching, you've been seeing these ridiculous water breaks, but that gives an opportunity for advertising. And our friends at Waymo are taking advantage of that advertising, pushing this, the claim that they're 10 times safer than a human. Has Waymo fixed or not, I don't want to say fixed, but we've criticized them many, many times over the past couple of years about, they should be more aggressive on PR and pushing the benefits of the car. Do they have the right people there now, Grayson? Are they heading in the right direction in terms of messaging better? And what do you make of the ads that you've seen so far?
I think Waymo's doing a good job. I wish the FIFA could get some help from Waymo on this one, because I can't understand offsides. I can understand the safety benefits of Waymo. I think Waymo is doing a good job of introducing the technology to the world. And I say the world because the World Cup is it is a global event. And they are taking a positive step forward. And the way that I read into that positive step forward is that there is a global expansion coming. We know Germany is coming, but the World Cup is a world event. To me, it's another signal that Waymo's going global. And I would say it is a good, positive first step. I'd like to see more communication from Waymo to the general public, but overall, very good first step. And to FIFA, please explain how a pinky, a toe, a millimeter is offsides. It's not fun.
If you want to see some VAR, and there's some good chance for VAR, you should watch some more EPL. It's this. I think their officiating has been generally fine so far for those that are familiar with how VAR and some of these things work. Look, Waymo is also, that's good, and they still need to get cars, but they're still making progress. We should cover it just so our listeners know. Airports, obviously a key issue, a key unlock that I've talked about before. Nashville, they've got a depot less than 5 miles away from this airport in Nashville, and then they're also doing curbside at San Jose. San Jose, San Jose is kind of it almost feels like a unique city within California. I saw how they dealt with some unruly fans after the World Cup victory. They are truly open for business, not what New York claims to be in terms of allowing, for these Waymos at the airport. And now curbside at San Jose, that's great. I just think it might be unique to them, but that's fine. The more cities that embrace this technology and save the lives of their citizens, it's just going to be a pressure, and we'll see that expansion in other markets.
It's a positive. Let's not forget, though, the San Jose mayor has presidential ambitions. So if that's driving it, I don't know, but I like it. I like to see it in more cities. I don't like to see the technology banned. And to the folks at SFO that listen, how can San Jose do curbside, but you can't do curbside at SFO? Just asking a simple question.
Because they're better and more forward thinking. Because they're better, more forward thinking. And good luck in that primary, by the way. Good luck. Anyway, so let's move on in terms of at the federal level, some stuff that's happened. I don't know if we covered this last week, but the Commerce has denied Polestar 2027 sales under this new connected vehicle rule. This is the same parent as Geely, but Volvo did get a waiver. Polestar didn't. I'm sure you were like rubbing your hands together. We're going back to the earliest episodes of Autonomy Markets where Grayson has talked about Waymo's unforced error, but they have kind of I haven't seen those cars get banned. If anything, if it's the opposite, they're proliferating in the market. And what I'm talking about is the Geely, or now called Ojai, on the Waymo network.
It's still, and I'm sticking to my guns, it is an unforced error, point blank. And I don't think it's over with. Am I digging in? I am digging in. And I asked a friend of mine who is a regulatory specialist, I said, what the heck is the difference? Wiring, Walt. Waymo, for all practical purposes, is basically just getting a shell with no wiring in it, where the Polestar vehicles had wiring. And that's how it was explained to me. Wiring, apparently, is the difference. But I don't know, sir, Secretary Lutnick, I got a lot of questions, sir. You've done a great job as secretary. I've got a lot of questions about why one, why the other. And is it truly wiring? Is it not truly wiring? I don't know. I still have questions.
Was there wiring in the plane that was just delivered to the president from the country of Qatar?
Oh boy, Walt, I'm not getting into politics. All I'll say is that's one sexy looking plane, but I'm not getting into politics.
Speaking of foreign countries, we do have some amount of a foreign autonomy deaths today. It's pseudo. FSD was approved in the Netherlands. Germany's still waiting. I saw some YouTube. I don't know if it's legit or not, but I think they're talking about China and getting FSD in China, or them wanting it there. I don't know why is it? I guess I was going to say why it's slow, but then again, we're dealing with Europe. I mean, these poor people are sweating in their apartments because of the lack of air conditioning and ranch dressing. I don't know what to do.
I gotta say, Walt, heat and ranch dressing do not go together. That is a smelly, nasty combo. I don't care any which way you say it.
Well, maybe that's why they don't have ranch dressing there, or they haven't enjoyed it because it's too hot to. You don't want to have ranch dressing in your 80-degree flat. Our best wishes to those in Europe: get an air conditioner that works. Good Lord.
You need air conditioning. What we do know is that Tesla clearly wants to take FSD global. And staying on the theme of Europe here, VW and Bosch, they broke up. Bosch is no longer going to supply an automated driving system to VW. If you look at the history of VW's autonomous start, stop, they have a partnership with Aurora. That ended. They had a partnership with Argo AI, which their investors. That ended. They tried Cariad multiple times. That ended. They've got union issues. They've got technology issues. They've got software issues. And they've got a company that's just not selling vehicles. So the question with that is, who ended it, Bosch or VW? There's a lot of questions there.
I mean, I don't think it matters. You're right. They also cut, I think, 100,000 jobs and closed about 4 factories in Germany. Little known fact, Grayson, I once owned one of the new Beetles from Volkswagen. Yes, I fit in there quite easily, but it is a German car, so there is plenty of leg room. It was a yellow Beetle.
So we played a Beetle game. I could do the punch, and I could say no punchbacks.
Punch bug. That's the whole reason I got it. I just wanted to see people beat the crap out of each other as I drove by.
I love this. I could see it. You got the Walt cam on there. And this was today. You got the Walt cam. You can stream it. How do people do the punchback game?
And also, it's also seeing a 6'5" dude climb himself out of a Volkswagen Beetle is also a sight to be seen. But good throwback vibes. The van, the throwback to the van was never anything that interesting to me. But best to them. I just like in that partnership, who actually owned any self-driving? Like, was there any actual brains anywhere, or were we just talking about some type of ADAS? Who were their partners?
Bosch has an internal system that they built. We do not know if it was licensed to VW. VW incorporated. We don't have any details on. Very, very light. All we know is that it's a breakup.
So it's a nice little light thing at the end of the podcast for those that got here that lasted this long.
A lot of people do. Well, you can see our retention numbers are actually pretty high. And as we always do, what do we need to look for next week? What's on deck?
Well, Grayson, I will be getting a haircut. I see that that's on my calendar. There's no earnings yet, but we'll do the prep work ahead of earnings. I've obviously had a very busy week in the world of space and telco, so that keeps me busy. But I'm sure our companies will give us some more news next week to deal with.
There is always news, and happy birthday, America. 250 years in counting of greatness. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is scaling. Walt, until next week.